I finally got it.
Everything started to flow.
I felt it in my gut.
It was as though a light went on.
It was a total aha moment.
How do we know what we know? Scientists uncover facts. Nature imparts wisdom. Storytellers weave our shared narrative, while contemplatives seek inner knowing. All that we know is imbued with imagination, and our understanding is ever emerging. Welcome to Knowing, a podcast that explores the synthesis of knowledge, illuminating creativity and insight.
Hello, friends. I'm Wendy Tremaine, your show host, and I'm here with my co-host, Rob Stroop. Hello, Rob.
Hey, how's it going?
Great. I've so enjoyed putting this show together with you and to share with our listeners. We started out with a theme of dark and light, and we have just run down all sorts of bunny trails exploring this.
The bunny trails, as you put it, that most piqued my interest were the more cultural ones. This whole devil on one shoulder, angel on the other, and the push and pull between good and evil.
We have Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader, and Hollywood seems to present infinite numbers of movies with this dynamic.
Oh, yes. When you see Gandalf with the staff of light, literally battling this cloud of darkness, it's a trope that we are very attached to.
And yet, we've found exceptions, right? There's the popular Chinese symbol of yin and yang, which represents darkness and light in harmony. There's no inherently good thing or bad thing. Good and bad exist in a context.
I think that's a beautiful viewpoint. From the West and growing up in a Christian household in the U.S., I'm more familiar with that context. We have the Ten Commandments. And I think a lot of religions are good at putting together tenets or commandments that are meant to guide us and lead us, and they all do it in slightly different ways.
It's hard to find a religion that doesn't have a list. And I think that's just human nature. I mean, I'm an obsessive list maker, and it serves it serves me very well. And it's normal for humans to try to organize their thoughts. And I think these lists and things we make, like the Ten Commandments, are really well-intending. And often they're quite good, and they carry us forward for a while.
It might be relevant here to read a more modern religion's tenets. These are 7 tenets. Do you want to just read through those now?
Let's dive in on these tenets. I'll start with the first.
Okay.
Tenet 1. One should strive to act with compassion and empathy toward all creatures in accordance with reason.
Number 2. The struggle for justice is an ongoing and necessary pursuit that should prevail over laws and institutions.
Number 3. One's body is inviolable, subject to one's own will alone.
Number 4. The freedoms of others should be respected, including the freedom to offend. To willfully and unjustly encroach upon the freedoms of another is to forego one's own.
Number 5. Beliefs should conform to one's best scientific understanding of the world. One should take care never to distort scientific facts to fit one's beliefs.
Number 6. People are fallible. If one makes a mistake, one should do one's best to rectify it and resolve any harm that might have been caused.
Number 7. Every tenet is a guiding principle designed to inspire nobility in action and thought. The spirit of compassion, wisdom, and justice should always prevail over the written or spoken word.
Wendy, do you want to share with our audience where those came from?
I do, but I first want to say, even though tenets are by design brief, and if we went and unpacked them, whether it's the 10 Commandments or these tenets, it leads to all sorts of complexity. But just reading those tenets on face value, I have no problem with them. I think these are sane and reasonable tenets for a person to consider.
Agreed. I think these are worthy of contemplation.
The big reveal. So those 7 tenets are the tenets of the Satanic Temple.
Yeah. It's kind of unbelievable. I mean, as a person who grew up in the 80s during the Satanic Panic, in a suburban Christian small town USA kind of vibe, I guess we just believed that the Satanists were this evil group of people that did weird things behind closed doors and maybe even stole your cat and sacrificed it on the altar.
So basically, if my neighbor looks a little different than me and has black nail polish and the cat goes missing, probably my neighbor has sacrificed it to the devil.
Maybe that even makes a news story. Back in the 80s, that was not uncommon. There was quite a thing going on.
I remember people were up in arms over everything from Black Sabbath, the band, to KISS, which is an acronym for Knights in Satan's Service, and later,
That's what I heard.
later Marilyn Manson. But, I mean, even as a child, I saw these as theatrical, flamboyant, cultural, artistic icons.
That kind of music wasn't allowed in my home, actually secular music in general, but my brother did have a KISS record under his bed.
Oh, he had to keep it under the bed.
Oh, yeah. I've had many things found and burned through the years. But yeah, I remember looking at that cover and it was just so provocatively evil.
Yeah, it's enticing.
Yes.
Well, we're grown-ups now, you and I like to think our culture is a little more grown-up than we were then too. Let me lean in for a moment to a Rumi quote that I found when we were getting ready for this show.
Okay.
Remember, the entrance to the sanctuary is within you. The world exists as you perceive it. It is not what you see, but how you see it. It is not what you hear, but how you hear it. It is not what you feel, but how you feel it. What I like about this quote is that it puts the burden of responsibility on the individual to unpack what they see, what they hear, what they feel. And if we take the time, what is unpacking? That's moving something from the brain to the heart. It's dialing into a more contemplative view, which is broader, less narrow.
Mm-hmm.
And it puts the burden on us to not be reactive, but to widen our lens and see, hear, and feel from a deeper perspective.
And not be so judgmental of different points of view and different approaches. I think this is a good time to dig into the Luciferian story.
Mm-hmm.
Because in our Western culture, that binary culture we're talking about, as opposed to the yin and yang, which sort of synthesizes darkness and light, it's this stark good and evil thing. And that comes from evil entering the world through the fall of Lucifer. So I just want to share with you, growing up as a Christian, what I was taught.
Great.
Basically, it was an attempted coup. So Lucifer, the most beautiful and most powerful of all the angels, gets a bit big for his britches one day and decides he wants to be the top dog. So he gathers a group of angels that will follow him, and he attempts to overthrow. And basically God squashes the rebellion with his archangel Michael and banishes Lucifer and all of his minions to hell forever. And that is what sets the backdrop of what we've talked about, this good and evil in the world as two opposing forces.
Mm-hmm. Well, interestingly, we know this is not the only narrative, the Christian narrative, in spite of the fact that it may dominate our culture. The Sufi narrative, for example, poses that Lucifer was an angel that wouldn't bow down to Adam, wouldn't bow down to any part of the created reality, because the cosmology is that everything here is one thing. There's only one being expressing itself throughout all of time. And by Lucifer saying, I won't divide this wholeness by bowing to any part within it, in that narrative, Lucifer was kind of heroic, or you could say most true to the belief system that this is a unified reality.
Fascinating. So Lucifer in that story is not only acting as the scapegoat, but he's a bit of a hero.
Lucifer was the most loyal to that. And, you know, it's interesting. We have other references, and it's in our own language, right? So our word universe is Latin derived, universus. And the meaning of that word is toward one. The word religion, re larges in Latin, means reconnect.
Wow, that's cool.
So there's all these little hints in our history, but they're all saying the same thing. If we live in one universe, universus, one, and we forget that, so we try to reconnect, which is religion. Religion is the tools we find to reconnect. Then the $1 million question is, reconnect to what? And the Hindus answer it beautifully with the word nirvana. No difference. Reconnect to everything. So there's no difference between anything. And that really explains Lucifer's role. Lucifer wouldn't divide reality.
And as we'll see throughout the show, the darkness and the light depend on each other and are one united force in a way. I think it's really interesting at this point, because we gave the tenets of the Satanic Temple at the front, to talk briefly about their use of the Luciferian story. The Satanic Temple's interpretation is not rooted in any belief in the devil, because they're a non-theistic religion, but rather it's a philosophical and political stance. And in this stance, they're arguing for personal agency and rational thought, and in particular, the protection of civil liberties. They use the Luciferian imagery as symbolism to challenge the dominant religious orthodoxy, and in general, promote secular and humanistic worldviews. It's more sympathetic to the adversary, because they see themselves, I think, as the adversaries in this culture, to try to balance out anything from being dominant, to make fairness.
There's a contemplative phrase we use in Sufism, which is, no, not here. So wherever you look in reality and say, oh, this is all holy, but not there, not there. And we do this all the time, and we shut our heart to something or someone. Wherever we do that, we create shadow. And so that thing, whatever it is going to gnaw at us and gnaw at us until we learn to integrate it and see more clearly.
Yes, and I think that's an excellent moment to move towards our interview, which I'm very excited about.
Today's interview is with Stu De Haan. He's a criminal defense attorney and has been the legal advisor for the Satanic Temple.
Now, before we get to our interview, I'll present a short segment illustrating darkness and light in musical terms, and we will also hear from a PhD physicist who has a unique perspective to harmonize science and metaphysics.
Sounds really exciting. Let's do it. Okay, listeners, here we go, into a realm of boundless possibilities,
where we just might find creativity and insight. Great music composition is all about creating tension and resolve. Without the tension, there is no resolve. If I play a bunch of happy major chords, you soon will be reaching for the radio dial. That said, the intervals that create mood and tension in music have a sordid past. During the Middle Ages and Renaissance periods, the Catholic Church had restrictions on certain musical intervals. Even the use of the minor chord was discouraged. This led to the development of the Picardy Third, where composers would resolve their piece on a major chord, even though the tonal center of the piece is minor. They found that if their piece ended on a major chord, they could get away with sneaking all kinds of minor chords into their composition. But the interval that was the most forbidden was the tritone. Living right between the perfect fourth and the perfect fifth, there's this devious little interval. This interval was known as Diabolus in Musica, or the devil in music, because of its unsettling sound. But just listen to how dramatic the resolve can be when the devil is in the details.
Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Martin Luther King, Jr. If we're to explore the unknown, it's helpful to understand what is so far known. A wise person once said that for every effect there is a cause, and for every cause there is a reason. Let's go to Suhwardi Gebel, a PhD physicist, presenting his view on the darkness and the light.
You might think of the darkness of outer space. In recent years, there's been a discovery of a cosmic background radiation, which is present everywhere through space. It's a remnant of the original Big Bang, and it's present everywhere in the universe, so there's no place in the darkness of space where that radiation is not present. So in that sense, there is no such thing as darkness in the universe.
Stu De Haan is a criminal defense attorney and the legal advisor for the Satanic Temple, as well as trial counsel for the Invocation Campaign and the battle for Baphomet in Arkansas. He is an instructor for the Ordination Program, focusing on the history of witch hunts. He hosted TST TV's Devil's Dispatch talk show for one season. He's also featured in the popular documentary film about the Baphomet battle in Arkansas, titled Hail Satan. Let's go now to Wendy's interview with Stu De Haan.
Welcome, Stu.
Thank you very much for having me.
So let's start with, Stu, you're here partly because of your role specifically with the organization, the Church of Satan.
Satanic Temple.
The Satanic Temple.
Yeah.
So the Church of Satan, where am I getting that phrasing from?
They're the original. So in the 1960s, Anton LaVey founded the Church of Satan. He wrote the Satanic Bible. So the Church of Satan is kind of the original, what we call codified modern Satanism. We are kind of a denomination of Satanism, the Satanic Temple. It's separate. There's a lot of discussion about, who's the real one, just like any other religion. Our version of Satanism is a little more of a progressive version, I guess you'd say.
So you are an attorney, and that was where you were coming from when you aligned with this group. So let's hear your story on how you got involved.
The career I've had for the last almost 20 years is as a criminal defense attorney. So in a way, it's a constitutional lawyer, but in the criminal realm. So, I'm always interested in these types of things, the whole justice and representing the downtrodden, so to speak, the people that don't have anyone else really representing them. That was always kind of an attractive career path for me. And I've always kind of, dabbled in Satanism, more in the aesthetic than anything else, because I was in a metal band for many years. I was a kid of the Satanic Panic era. So, Dungeons and Dragons and heavy metal and all that stuff that, your mom wanted to throw in the trash can, that era. But the reason I got involved with the Satanic Temple is something I saw on the news around 2015, I'd say. And that was a Baphomet monument, which is a 8-foot tall bronze goat figure. It has wings. It's the reconciliation of opposites. So it has wings, hooves, scales. It's hermaphroditic. It's part male, it's part female. It's a very well-known satanic icon, and it's kind of representative of that, and some other groups too. And the idea was it was to be placed on the steps of the capital of Oklahoma. And the reason why was there was a 10 Commandments. And since we live in a secular pluralist state, you can't endorse or disparage religions over each other. So somebody, this group, which I didn't know anything about them at the time, just had this drawing of this Baphomet as the example of the monument that was to be placed there. The thing that I noticed about their monument is it had no breasts, which of course typically the Baphomet has breasts and a phallus. And I knew immediately why. It's because they were fighting a religious liberty battle, not an obscenity battle. So if you were to take it all the way to the end and win on the religious discrimination, if this thing is not allowed to be placed, all of a sudden it'll be taken down anyway because of obscenity laws. So when I saw that image had no breast, I immediately knew why. I was like, oh, these people are savvy. So within a year of that, I ended up being the in-house counsel for the entire organization. I met Lucian Greaves, who's the co-founder, and they didn't really have a lawyer that was going to stick around. It was per case and whoever would take it, which a lot of lawyers didn't want to be, the literal devil's advocate. So no one was taking these cases. So that was kind of my path into this interesting separation of church and state battle.
So it sounds like this was political activism, social activism in a sense.
It wasn't activism so much as law. I mean, to me, this was classic First Amendment law, the kind of classic First Amendment law you learn in law school, but no one had ever done it this way. And it was a group that I was interested in. If anyone else tried to do something like that, it would never work. And I saw a group trying. So to me, it was more legal than political or religious to start.
So why were you willing to take that risk? Because you still have a law degree that you're, working from, right? That's still your occupation. So personally, why was that risk something you were willing to take?
That's a really good question, actually, that I don't get very often. But a lot of it had to do with I didn't have a boss at the time, so no one could fire me over it. I didn't have kids, so I wasn't putting the target on the back of some kid in school when my name or face is on the news. I had a private practice, so I could take any cases I wanted. And I did this pro bono, actually, throughout my time doing it. It was kind of my duty because I'm like, no one else is going to do it. The statute of limitations were running. And it was like, if no one takes these cases, they're not going to happen at all.
The particular approach, as you like to speak about it, is plurality. Mm-hmm. So let me let you frame that for our listeners.
Even here, separation of church and state law. The idea is these organizations are trying to remove the predominant religious imagery from the government sector because, by its very definition, it's promoting one religion over all others. We do not seek to remove religious imagery from the public square. We seek to add it. And in doing so, they have to make a choice. And this is what started to be called Lucian's Law. They have to keep the public forum, but allow everyone in, including us, or they have to eliminate the public forum altogether. So, here's another example. Some girl was not allowed to wear a goat pendant or a pentacle or something like that. So we come in and say, okay, to be fair, you have to remove every crucifix around every neck.
How did the release of the film add to or affect the already created action from the event itself? And likewise, what was the role of the media there for you?
The one thing unintentionally that the documentary caused the view of us is that we're merely activists and that we're not Satanists. And that's not true. A lot of people were in it for the activism. And then when it got a little too spooky for them, they're like, wait a minute, this is all a hoax, isn't it? And it's like, no, actually, we are religious Satanists, but it's a non-theistic religion, which Westerners have a really hard time wrapping their mind around because religion to the West is monotheism. It's not polytheism. It's not, a path like Buddhism. It is one God. That's how most Americans, Westerners see religion. So I think even within the temple, there is a lot of interesting conversations about what a non-theistic religion looks like. And some might say it's not a religion at all. We actually overcame that argument in court. And the documentary really focused on the activism part because, that was the stuff in the news. That's the stuff you hear about. That's what put us in the spotlight. But, that's going to happen in every group.
What is the size of the group, do you know, at this time?
I just saw today on Instagram, the temple said that we had a milestone today of 700,000 members.
Ooh. So let's talk a little now about that edge, where it's activism, it's a form of social change, it's the law, it's an attorney looking at the Constitution, and then there's this crossover line of, no, it's religion. So you mentioned that case. So how did the word religion get defined? And then in what way do you see this as a religion? What are the components that for you make this a religion?
That was an interesting occurrence in court, which I was very nervous about. Because if all they have to do is say, these guys aren't a religion, well, then we have no argument. It's gone because then it becomes state speech rather than freedom of religion issues. That's a whole other field of law. So, I love it when people ask Lucian Greaves, are you guys trolls? Are you a real religion? Are you activists? Which is it? And his answer is, it's all of it. Like, why can't it be both things? To some people, this is their art. To some people, this is their charity. There's a lot of food drives and we'd had one called Lord of the Ties, which we collected suits for people that had court appearances or needed to do job interviews that might not otherwise be able to afford it. We have Menstruating with Satan, where we collect menstrual products for organizations that are accepting of the trans community, kind of charities for people that are, disenfranchised or what have you. This is all part of what a religion does. So there's ritual events. Often they have to do with destroying something that you keep around that causes you pain, a lot of destruction rituals, or letting go of the past rituals and stuff like that. Unbaptisms, since baptism is an unconsensual event. So these are the kind of things. So we have ceremonies, we have rituals, we have iconography, we have texts, a lot of what's called romantic era Satanism. Paradise Lost is like almost like canonized piece of literature because, God's the tyrant and Lucifer represents the rebellion. So it's kind of religion through rebellion. And it has, in the aggregate, all the components of a religion except for a deity. We don't believe in a literal Satan. Modern Satanism never really has. But then people go, we got you. If you don't believe in it literally, you can't be a Satanist. If you think of all religions as metaphor, right? So a Christian doesn't believe the Hindu gods exist, and vice versa. The religion exists, but their gods don't. Now, we just believe that of ourselves also. We think that this is a metaphor to contextualize our work. And that is the religion, is the rebellion against what we see as arbitrary tyranny, which is religious privilege in a country that touts itself on being the most religiously free. So that being said, in court, when all of these things came out, we even went through the plaintiff's tattoos. What's this tattoo? What is that tattoo? Oh, that's the sigil of Lucifer, that a lot of us have that tattoo. And she went through her tattoos, her jewelry, her clothes, like all of this iconography. And the judge said, this fits the bill. It's something that they see as greater than themselves. It's community. It's you could go down the list. And the judge said, yeah, this is a religion. For these people, it's deeply held religious beliefs. These are the courts, and they're not supposed to define religion, but they can say if one is or not, and then they're hands off from there.
That's a critical case.
It's dicta, so it wasn't a ruling per se, but I think it's at least foreshadowing that we can get over that hurdle.
Yeah. So there's a great irony that I see in this, which is that in the day that we're living in, the devil, the dark, so to speak, should be the ingredient needed to show where the shadow has fallen and should be the tool required to actually bring back the light, metaphorically speaking. Mm-hmm. I just want to hear your thoughts on this irony. I'm sure you've thought a great deal about it.
The way that I describe it is a socio-political countermyth. And that's the endless question about God. If he's all-knowing and omnipotent, why do people suffer, right? But that kind of opens up a whole dialogue of what's good and evil, like really basic questions. Is discriminating right? Is discriminating part of your religion? And if so, is that okay? And I think these conversations of when we open the door to God, we open the door to the devil, as it's been said. Do they want to open these doors or not? And if you're going to put your money where your mouth is, you're going to go with religious liberty, but it's not going to be exactly how you envisioned it.
I'd like to talk a little bit about what you imagine the future of this work to be and the future of the Satanic Temple. Can you grasp that?
We're just trying to get a place at the table, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And the more they resist, the more people join. And it's kind of the Streisand effect, where if they had let us have our 2 minutes to give our talk, no one would have ever heard of us. But they're censoring us is why all the attention comes.
They're amplifying.
So, yeah, they're amplifying, and then people are starting to ask questions.
And if all goes well, there'll be no need for it, right?
There'll be no need for the lawsuits. And I keep saying I'm ready to stop litigating Satanism and start living Satanism. In a perfect world, we would still exist, and we just wouldn't have to fight for our rights.
And when I say that, I'm imagining a neutralizing effect. So when you're buying your 5-year-old niece a birthday gift, you might pick the Teletubby doll and you might pick the little Baphomet, and you would have no hesitation over either. It's gone neutral, is my point.
There's plenty of plush Baphomets out there too already. So
it exists already.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I want one.
Of course, the irony to me is I don't think we'll get to a point where there's a Baphomet in every household, but I don't want that either. I just want our little corner of the world to be safe.
I know from talking to you that it's taken a toll on you, this work, and I'm sure you can speak not just for yourself, but you've seen the toll it's taken on the people who've been part of this organization and doing this work. So can you speak about that for a minute?
Sure. And I do think in a general sense, if your role is to fight a status quo or a very established norm, it's an uphill battle, and it's very difficult. You're always outnumbered and outgunned and outfinanced, and people think you're a caricature.
Well, wow, we're having a kind of magic moment. It just began to rain. I don't know if our listeners could hear this, but we're in a desert in a drought. What I hear when you talk about the toll it's taken on you, and in particular, the way that people have, been aggressive and shown anger and responded with this really intense energy, it's so interesting because it's the energy they fear you carry, and you're activating it in them. So you're literally putting up a mirror and allowing people to project their shadows in a public way. There's a sect of Sufis that have been around for eons that they're the blame takers. Their spiritual practice is they seek out where blame is being passed, and essentially they show up and say, I did it. So it's another version of neutralizing.
I think for us, we're intentionally taking on the role of the scapegoat, which is a strange practice if you were to look historically, but we feel in the modern era that this is incredibly important because it's like we're the ones running straight into the danger intentionally. The Luciferian story when he's cast down, right? He comes back and tries with a vengeance to take it back against all odds. That's our metaphor. That's what we see as our duty. But yeah, it is a scapegoating position.
Because we live in material reality, we have dualism, dualistic thinking. We can't escape it, right? This is our construct. A singularity has no existence. So the moment a big bang splits off and makes 2 and 4 and 6 and 8 and keeps going, and now, we're on the path of evolution, it is by necessity that there be contrast and friction. That's really the deeper keynote of the whole game here.
No right that was ever gained wasn't fought for. I mean, from having the weekend to, women's rights to, the right to vote for all different groups came at different stages, right? First this group could vote, then that group could vote, then this group will allow to marry, then that group will allow to marry. And it's just this interesting arc. So I feel that this fight to just kind of break down this religious supremacy in the one country that guarantees religious freedom, yeah, and how religious freedom isn't used as a shield anymore. It's used as a sword. It's not used to protect people. It's used to harm people. And I think people really feel that. We feel a unique need. Let's face it, religion is part of the human experience. Every time period, every culture that's ever existed, they have had some sort of religious belief, community, what have you. And I think a lot of people in our community, they want that united sense of belonging and things that, the temple can offer.
What are your joyful parts? What filled you up and made you proud of yourself and gave you happiness, and what fed you in this fight?
They always joke, you can't be the devil's advocate unless you literally have a bar license and represent Satan in court. And I was like, oh, I did that. Yeah.
Before we wrap up this episode, is there anything you want to share that I didn't ask you about?
Actually, something unrelated that you made me think of when you said the blame takers. That's actually the namesake of my band that I was in, Scar Eater.
Oh, yeah.
That we actually took that from an Aztec legend, that the Scar Eater was a goddess, and she would eat your sins and your scars, both physically and kind of metaphorically, and that way you could pass on pure to the next world. But in doing so, she became this hideous figure that's just made of scars and pain and sin, but she was actually like a good, positive deity. And I always like those dichotomies, but she was kind of the blame taker.
I see that. Well, Stu, I want to thank you for this time and for sitting with us. It's been a pleasure, and I'm really excited to share you with our listeners.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. When things go all right or all wrong, I'll still have a lot to say about it. So.
Once upon a time, when it got dark at night, as the earth turned our village away from the sun, we used a candle flame to light our way. Well, one night, a little mouse, weary of the cat with tiger stripes, was scurrying around the kitchen looking for a tasty breadcrumb or maybe a crumble of cheese. His eyes saw at the light he hit the jackpot. A slice of bread with butter was left on a candle, slowly burning down. And he set to nibbling, and he nibbled so much that he began to slow down, got drowsy, and dozed off for a minute. But a clunk from the living room jerked him awake. It was the sound of a mug dropping out of the hand of the householder, who perhaps had drunk a little too much honey wine. The mouse opened his eyes wide, and what he saw made all of his hairs stand on end. On the wall in front of him, he saw a giant demon. And as he raised his little paw, the giant also raised his arm to smash our little friend to smithereens. He fell back in fear. "Oh no, a monster, and it's coming after me. What'll I do? What'll I do?" But he saw the monster put his arm down. Well, the mouse put his little paws over his head in relief, and the monster, he did the same. He took one of his paws down, and the monster did the same. Then a voice inside his head asked, "Well, what is that?" He began to move his head, and the head of the monster moved. He took down his other paw, and the monster took down his arm. So our little friend stood up on his haunches and began to laugh, and the monster shook in laughter too. "That was me," he squeaked. He wondered what would happen if he turned around. Well, he did, and the figure on the wall disappeared. Where did it go? It was quite fearsome. I was afraid, he thought. When I look away from the light, I see the shadow, but when I turn to the light, the shadow's gone. Aha, he said to himself. I'll remember this for a long time.
If it were not for dark matter, whirling galaxies would fly apart, and clusters of galaxies would also disperse. The total amount of dark matter that's required to hold things together gravitationally, it comes out to 5 times as much as the visible matter of the universe. Then there's dark energy, and that is not directly observed, but inferred because the expansion of the universe is accelerating. And if we estimate how much dark energy there must be in order to make the universe accelerate, it turns out to be 14 times the mass of the visible universe. Another way of saying it is that matter that we understand in the universe, that the laws of physics apply to, is 5% of the total matter. Einstein famously said, "The eternal mystery of the world is its comprehensibility. The fact that it is comprehensible is a miracle." And he made this statement before dark matter and dark energy were known. Now we would have to revise this statement to say that 5% of the matter of the universe is comprehensible. However, the remaining 95% is a mystery. This constitutes the tension of light and darkness in science. At the end of the 19th century, there was a general consensus in physics that we were just wrapping up details and we were coming close to understanding the way that the universe works. And then came the discovery of quantum mechanics and relativity. So it seems more likely to me, if we solve the mystery of dark matter and dark energy, we won't run out of mysteries. There'll be many further mysteries to solve. Now, one way to consider how to reduce the tension between our knowledge and our ignorance, the light and the darkness, is by embracing the mystery. appreciating the feeling of awe that the mystery produces in us. Not seeing the mystery as something to overcome, but rather seeing the mystery as something magnificent to behold.
We set out to produce a show titled Darkness Brings the Light, but it was actually in the producing of the show that became something I really understood to be true.
I too was profoundly impacted by our research on this show. Let's take a moment to unpack that.
But first I have to talk about the Christmas gift you gave me last year.
Okay, why don't you tell?
Well, you gave me a plushy Baphomet.
I did. Yeah, I was editing the interview and it came across that moment where you talked about the Baphomet plushie and that you wanted one. And I was like, oh, this is solvable. So I hopped over and had one sent.
Well, I love my plushy Baphomet, and I think it's especially funny because I was raised Jewish and then became a Sufi. I'm what they call a Jufi. And then you came out of fundamentalist Christianity. So, it is such a wildly inappropriate gift for either of us that I think it's really funny.
Layers of irony.
Hey, did you catch the story in the press just around the time we were wrapping this show up about our governor?
I did hear about that, yes. Do you want to talk about it or do you want me to talk about it?
Jump right in.
Okay. Well, our governor here in New Mexico, amidst some aggressive criticism, listed the Satanic Temple in the groups that were providing important services to the community. And so she came under some scrutiny for it, and she kind of just went, we have a religious freedom in this country. I don't care where the work is coming from. They deserve to be listed along with everyone else.
I was so proud of her, and I don't feel like I was smart enough to be that great. If you talked to me right before I produced this show, and I learned a lot, I used to be kind of scared of the idea of a Satanic Temple. And even when you and I considered this interview, I was a little like, ooh, this feels weird.
But then you get to know the person, and you're like, okay, this is just another being. They're playing their role in this human cosmic drama.
It's our distance from people. It's our not knowing them that lets shadow exist. But as soon as we connect and we talk and we learn each other's story, everything changes.
So true. And can I point out something too that may be seemingly obvious? Honoring all paths to the mountain, giving everyone the freedom to pursue their own inner knowing, their own gnosis, and follow where their heart tugs them, where they feel the most connected and the most whole and the best version of themselves. It's not only so important, it's so personal.
So every set of eyes, what they can see as holy, is unique to every other set. I want to hear everybody's report. How do you see this? How do you see this? And to me, that is the drive and the beauty of religious diversity.
Can you imagine living under the Taliban in Afghanistan or dealing with the morality police in Iran? We have something here in this country that's that religious freedom that our forefathers actually argued for. They did not, in my opinion, try to establish a Christian nation, but they tried to establish a nation where we have freedom of religion. So the work that Stu is doing is actually really great work in the world.
Yeah, he's tempering that line that you just expressed, the intention of the founding fathers of our country. It's gone out of joint and needs correction.
And I think it's also worth saying that the Luciferian different versions of that story we shared at the top of the show, I couldn't help but see the connection between Stu, who, knowing that he was going to be ridiculed, he was going to be demonized, probably widely hated, certainly smeared all over the internet for his association with this organization. But he felt if he didn't do this work, no one would. And he answered that call and he kind of took the fall, so to speak.
In that way, I see the Satan archetype in the way that the people of the Satanic Temple see it, a metaphorical construct, a kind of role model that he likened to the Buddha. He said words similar to what you just said, like no right gained was not fought for. Women's rights, equality, religious freedoms, the right to have a weekend. As you said, he heard a call. That must be frightening to hear a scary call, to step up to it and say, I'm going to meet this call. And he revealed, too, that there were risks. And yeah, he was in a position to do it. He didn't have kids, but he still had a law degree that he could taint. And there were risks involved. And he took a lot of abuse. There was a real sacrifice here and a courage. But essentially, as you pointed out, it comes from him hearing a call and being willing to come out to meet it, however frightening that may be.
To me, it's like him being the scar eater, like that he talked about. His band was named after. I also really loved what Gebel brought to the equation. He's talking about actual darkness and light in space. The cosmic background radiation means that light exists even in the darkest parts of the universe.
Yeah, he said there's no such thing as darkness. It was remarkable when Suhwardi shared with us that 95% of the universe is unknown to us, and only 5% is known to us. So essentially, most of the universe is what we call dark matter. And that really made me consider, how can we judge what is unknown when it's 95% of the universe?
Just when we think that we're just about to figure out the whole universe, along comes this discovery of dark matter and dark energy, and it blows the whole thing wide open. And suddenly we realize that vast majority is unfathomable to us.
He followed that with a suggestion that we learn to enjoy, to live in the mystery.
That was my favorite part. Every time you answer a scientific question, you've proved a thesis, you raise 10 more questions. So even though we're discovering our universe, and I think it's a very important pursuit, we're also in the process expanding the mystery. And he suggested that it is the reconciliation of darkness and light in science to embrace the mystery.
It also invites us to live our lives a little differently. If we have to live in the mystery, because we are in a mystery, literally, our lives might be with a sense of awe and wonder, and maybe we'll be a little more able to let go and embrace magical thinking and metaphor and the creative mind, which is really the part of us that is our curiosity. And how else do you learn what you don't yet know and discover that 95% without curiosity?
Great point. I'm going to steer us, if you don't mind, into left field here. Can I ask you something?
Sure.
Were you at any point or at any age ever afraid of the dark?
Oh, yes. I still am sometimes.
Oh. As a child, I was terrified. I was absolutely certain that as soon as that light switch went off, that all of the goblins and demons and every figure I'd ever seen in movies, Dracula, were all going to be coming out of the shadows. I was certain of it.
I was terrified of the dark. I still am sometimes. This reminds me of a mouse who recognizes, after doing a little dance with his shadow, that his shadow is himself. And the only thing to do is turn on the light.
I think that's actually a perfect sentiment to wrap this up. Do you agree?
Yes, and let's end with a quote by Leonard Cohen. He said, "There is a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in."
Love Leonard Cohen.
I know.
Well, Wendy, I just want to say to you, that was a great interview and excellent work on this show.
Thank you, Rob. Until next time.
Have fun out there. A special thanks to Suhwardi Gebel, PhD physicist and teacher in the Inayatiyya Sufi order, for his contributions to this episode. We are always delighted to receive feedback from our listeners. Email knowingpodcast@gmail.com and stay connected on Substack. Knowing is written, produced, and hosted by Wendy Tremaine and myself, Rob Stroop. Original music and sound design also by Rob Stroop. Recorded and produced at Taproot Studio, Truth or Consequences, New Mexico. Knowing is a production of Chapter 24 Media. Thanks for listening.